My name is Lila Prescott. I am 44 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is something I never thought I would survive for most of my life. I worked quietly, moving from one household to another, cleaning the homes of strangers, polishing floors, scrubbing kitchens, and folding laundry that wasn't mine. And though it wasn't glamorous, it was honest work that put food on my table, kept the lights on, and allowed me to support the son I raised on my own after my husband abandoned us years ago. But I never expected that the job I took 3 years ago with the Whittaker family would turn into a nightmare so dark, so suffocating that I still wake up at night gasping for air, convinced that the shadows in the corners of my room are watching me. Looking back, I can see the red flags that I ignored the strange way Mrs. Whittaker studied me when she thought I wasn't looking, the cold smirk Mr. Whittaker gave when I accidentally walked into his office, and even the children whispering secrets in hallways as if I wasn't supposed to hear them. But at the time, I chalked it up to rich people being eccentric, out of touch, and accustomed to treating people like me as invisible. I should have known better. I should have walked away before their darkness seeped into me, before their manipulations, lies, and cruelty turned into something that nearly consumed my life. But I didn't. I stayed, and because of that, I became the unwilling keeper of their secrets and the target of their vengeance, which grew into something I could have never imagined. If you really want to know how it all happened, then stay with me till the very end, because my story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and remember, this story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. It started the very first night I slept in the Whittaker house, though at the time I didn't realize the weight of it. They had given me the smallest room on the 3rd floor, tucked at the far end of the hall near the attic staircase, and though it was furnished with only a narrow bed, a dresser, and a small lamp with a dim bulb that flickered if you left it on too long, I was grateful to have a place to rest. That first night I heard what I thought was someone walking in the attic, slow, dragging footsteps, like bare heels scraping across old wood. But when I mentioned it at breakfast the next morning, Mrs. Whittaker's eyes flashed with something sharp before she quickly dismissed it, saying, I must have been dreaming that the house was old and made strange noises. Still, there was something in her tone, something rehearsed, as though she had been preparing for me to ask that very question. At first my days there were routine: wake up before sunrise, prepare breakfast, clean the sprawling rooms one by one, pick up after the children, keep the laundry going, and make sure dinner was set before Mr. Whittaker returned home from his law firm. But it didn't take long for me to notice that things were off in ways that had nothing to do with eccentricity. For one, Mrs. Whittaker kept a locked journal on her nightstand, but often left pages scattered across the desk in her study, filled with strange notes and symbols that looked like old runes, lines and circles written in a shaky hand. Sometimes she would leave them half burned in the fireplace, and when I once tried to gather the ash to dispose of it, she caught me, her face pale and furious, demanding to know if I had read anything. I hidn't, but the fear in her eyes told me that the words meant something more than idle scribbling. The children were worse. At first they seemed polite too. Young girls ages 8 and 10 and a boy of about 12. But as the weeks passed, they began whispering to each other when I was near words half heard about her turn and don't tell until it's ready. And once I found a drawing under the youngest girl's pillow of a stick figure hanging by a noose with the name Lila scrawled in jagged letters across the bottom. I thought it was a cruel prank, a child's way of testing boundaries, but when I showed it to Mrs. Whittaker, she only smiled thinly and said children had wild imaginations. That night the footsteps in the attic grew louder, and for the first time I heard a voice, a woman's low moan, as though someone were trying to call out but couldn't form words properly. I sat up in bed, clutching the thin blanket around me, every muscle in my body tight with fear, and I swore. I felt the temperature drop, my breath fogging in the dim light. I told myself I was imagining it, that stress and exhaustion were making me hear things. But the next morning, when I went to sweep the hall near the attic stairs, I found long scratches down the wooden door, as though something or someone had tried to claw their way out. Things escalated after that. Mr. Whittaker began coming home later and later, reeking of alcohol. His tie loosened, his gaze lingering on me in ways that made my skin crawl. He cornered me once in the kitchen, his breath hot and sour against my ear, as he whispered that I should learn my place, that in this house I belonged to them. I shoved past him, shaking, and thought about quitting, but then he laughed, saying, You can't just walk away, Lila, you've seen too much already. I didn't know what he meant at the time, but those words would haunt me. The children too became bolder, leaving small dead animals in my laundry basket, birds with their wings broken, a squirrel with its throat slit, and once a note written in a child's hand that said, The attic is hungry. I didn't sleep much after that. I started locking my bedroom door at night, though it barely made me feel safer because the noises from the attic grew worse, and once I woke to find my lamp flickering on and off by itself, the bulb glowing blood red before it finally went dark. I thought I was losing my mind until the night I followed the sound of footsteps up the attic stairs. I don't know what possessed me to do it, maybe desperation, maybe defiance, but as I crept up those narrow steps, holding only a small candle, I heard the sound of chains dragging, of something shifting in the dark above. The door was cold to the touch, colder than ice, and when I slowly pushed it open, the smell hit me. First out like decayed flesh, my candle sputtered. And in that faint glow, I saw what looked like a figure crouched in the corner, hair hanging down over its face, skin pale and stretched as though it hadn't seen sunlight in years. It moved when it saw me, and I dropped the candle, plunging the attic into darkness. I screamed, stumbled backward down the stairs, and slammed the door shut, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. When I turned around, Mrs. Whittaker was standing at the end of the hall, her nightgown glowing white in the dark, her eyes wide and unblinking, and in the silence she whispered, "You weren't supposed to see her." I froze when Mrs. Whittaker whispered those words, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest, and before I could say anything she turned silently and glided back down the hall, disappearing into the master bedroom, as if nothing had happened, leaving me shaking, clutching the doorknob to the attic like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. And though I told myself to forget what I saw, to pack my things and leave before sunrise, something inside me knew it was already too late, that I had become entangled in something so sinister there was no way of walking away without consequences. The next morning, Mrs. Whittaker acted as though nothing was wrong, sipping her tea, her long nails tapping against the porcelain cup, her voice calm and measured as she instructed me to polish the silverware and strip the bed sheets. But when her eyes met mine for a brief second, I could see the knowledge that I had seen the figure in the attic, the satisfaction that she knew fear had taken root inside me. The children too seemed different, as though they had been told, their whispers louder, their giggles sharper. And the eldest boy, Matthew, smirked when he passed me in the hall, muttering under his breath, "She's awake now." I didn't understand what he meant, but I felt the weight of those words pressing against me all day, gnawing at my sanity. That night the footsteps returned, heavier this time, pacing back and forth directly above my room, and at one point, I swear I heard a raspy breath just beyond my locked door, as if someone were crouching outside waiting. I shoved the dresser against the door, sat on my bed with my knees pulled tight against my chest, and prayed for daylight. But when the sun finally rose, it brought no peace. The Whittakers began changing their behavior in subtle but terrifying ways. Mr. Whittaker no longer tried to disguise his leering glances, letting his eyes linger openly on me whenever I bent to scrub the floors, and Mrs. Whittaker began asking me strange questions, like whether I believed in the afterlife or if I ever felt guilty about my sins, as though she were digging into the darkest parts of me on purpose. Once she cornered me in the pantry, her perfume cloying her face inches from mine, and whispered, "Do you think you'd make a good offering?" Before walking away with a cold laugh, I told myself to leave, to run before they trapped me further. But every time I thought about it, I remembered Mr. Whittaker's words, "You can't just walk away, Lila. You've seen too much already." I realized they would never let me leave, not alive, and that thought kept me rooted in terror. One evening while cleaning the dining room, I overheard them in the study, their voices hushed but urgent, and though I knew it was dangerous, I pressed myself against the door to listen. "She's seen her," Mrs. Whittaker hissed, "and if she's seen her, she's marked." Mr. Whittaker's voice was lower, angrier. "Then finish it. We can't afford another delay." My blood ran cold, and I backed away, nearly dropping the feather duster in my trembling hand. Finish it? What did they mean by that? That night's sleep was impossible. I paced my room, staring at the attic door, down the hall, waiting for footsteps, for breathing, for something. And when the silence grew unbearable, I cracked my window and considered climbing out, running barefoot into the night. But just as I pushed the glass open, I froze in the reflection of the pain. I saw someone behind me. I whipped around, heart in my throat, but the room was empty. Only the dresser, the lamp, the narrow bed. And yet the air was heavy, thick, suffocating, and my skin prickled with the certainty that I wasn't alone. I don't know how long I sat there frozen before the sound came again, chains dragging, only this time not from the attic. From the hallway, from just outside my door. I shoved the dresser tighter against it, holding my breath as the chains scraped along the wood as something heavy dragged itself slowly past my room. Then silence. Hours passed before morning came, and when I finally stepped out into the hall, I saw black smears along the floor like soot or dry blood, leading back toward the attic Stairs, my stomach twisted, and before I could move, I heard laughter behind me, the children. All three stood at the end of the hall, their eyes blank, their mouths smiling too wide, and in unison they whispered, "She likes you, Lila." I stumbled back, shaking, demanding to know who she was, but they only giggled and ran off. That evening, as I cleared the table after dinner, Mr. Whittaker stopped me, his hand firm on my wrist. His smile was thin, sharp, and he leaned close enough for me to smell the wine on his breath. "You'll be staying," he said as if it were an order. I yanked my arm free, heart racing, and blurted out that I wanted to quit, that I couldn't work there anymore. For a moment the room fell silent. Mrs. Whittaker's spoon clinking softly against her teacup as she stared at me, and then she said very quietly, "You can quit, Lila, but you won't leave." The way she said it, calm and certain, sent ice through my veins. That night I didn't even try to sleep. I sat awake, clutching a pair of scissors I had taken from the sewing basket, my ears straining for any sound, and sure enough, just after midnight, I heard the attic door creak open, the sound of something crawling down the stairs, the chain dragging, the groan of wood beneath weight that seemed too heavy for a person. I held my breath as the footsteps stopped outside my room, the air turning frigid, my lamp flickering until it went out, plunging me into darkness. I could feel it. Her on the other side of the door, waiting, breathing, and then with slow, deliberate pressure, the knob began to turn. The doorknob turned slowly in the darkness, metal squeaking as though each sound was deliberate, meant to stretch my terror into something unbearable, and I pressed my back against the wall, gripping the scissors so tightly my hands ached, waiting for whatever was on the other side to force its way in. But just as the lock seemed to give, the footsteps retreated, slow and dragging, the chain rattling faintly as it moved back toward the attic, and for a moment I thought I had imagined the whole thing until I heard Mrs. Whittaker's voice faintly above me, soothing, coaxing, like a mother calming a child, and though I couldn't make out the words, the tone was unmistakable, and it made me realize that she wasn't just aware of the creature in the attic, she was controlling it. The next day the family behaved as though nothing had happened, laughing over breakfast, the children flicking cereal at each other, Mr. Whittaker pretending to read the paper, and Mrs. Whittaker humming under her breath. But every now and then her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and knowing, and I understood the game they were playing. They wanted me broken, frightened, and obedient. Too weak to resist. When the time came that afternoon, while dusting the library, I found something that shifted everything, the key to Mrs. Whittaker's locked journal hidden in a hollowed-out book of poems. My hands trembled as I fit the key into the brass lock, opening the leather-bound diary to pages filled with more of those strange symbols, along with rambling entries about feeding the hunger, binding the servant, and keeping the pact. My blood ran cold as I read about a she who required offerings to remain contained, who could not be allowed to escape, or she would devour the bloodlines scrawled in the margins were dates, some going back decades, with names next to them, maids, nannies, servants, all of them listed as given. My breath caught when I saw a line that hadn't yet been crossed out. Lila Prescott. My hands shook so badly the book nearly slipped from my fingers, and just then the door creaked open. Mrs. Whittaker stood there, her face calm, almost pleasant, but her eyes locked on the open journal in my hands. For a long moment she said nothing, and then she smiled, soft and chilling. "Curiosity, Lila, is a dangerous thing," I stammered an apology. Shoved the book back into its hiding place, but she only tilted her head, watching me with a kind of detached amusement before saying, "It's too late now, she knows your name." I fled the library, my heart in my throat, but the words clung to me like a curse. That night the noises returned, louder than ever, thudding footsteps, scraping claws, a guttural moan that reverberated through the walls until I thought the house itself was groaning with it, and for the first time I heard my own name whispered in the dark, drawn out and distorted. Lee. Lily. I shoved the scissors beneath my pillow and covered my ears, rocking back and forth as tears streamed down my face, but it didn't stop the sound. At some point, exhausted, I must have drifted into a fitful sleep, because I woke with the faintest sensation of someone brushing a strand of hair from my face. And when my eyes flew open, I saw a pale hand retreating into the shadows. I screamed, bolted upright, and the children's laughter echoed from the hallway, cruel and mocking. The next day, desperation clawed at me. I searched the house till the family was out, creeping into rooms I was forbidden from entering, rifling through drawers and cabinets, looking for anything. Keys, papers, something that could explain what was happening, but instead I found photographs, dozens of them, all black and white, some cracked and faded with age, showing housemaids. I didn't recognize each of them, posed stiffly, their expressions hollow, and on the back of each photograph, written in Mrs. Whittaker's elegant hand, was a date and a single word. Offered, I dropped the stack bile rising in my throat, realizing these weren't just records, they were trophies. A sudden crash upstairs made me jump, and though I wanted to run, I forced myself to follow the sound creeping toward the attic staircase. The door was ajar, now the scratches deeper, fresher, and as I slowly pushed it open, I saw the figure again. But this time she wasn't cowering in the corner, she was standing. Her limbs were long and too thin, her hair matted and stringy, her eyes white and unblinking, and the chains around her wrists clinked softly as she took a step toward me. The smell of decay filled my lungs, and I stumbled back, heart racing, until Mrs. Whittaker's voice snapped through the darkness like a whip. Back. The creature froze, her head twitching unnaturally toward the sound, and Mrs. Whittaker appeared from the shadows, holding a silver pendant that glowed faintly. The thing hissed, retreating, and Mrs. Whittaker turned to me, her face cold. "Do you see now?" she whispered. "Do you understand what's expected of you?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, as she guided me back down the stairs, her hand firm on my shoulder like a vice, and when we reached the hall, she leaned close to my ear, her breath hot and sweet. "She's hungry, Lila, and you will feed her." That night, they didn't lock me in my room. Instead, the children led me by candlelight through the halls, their eyes glazed, their voices chanting something low in rhythmic words I couldn't understand. They brought me to the dining room, where the long table had been stripped bare, replaced with symbols drawn in chalk across the wood, and Mrs. Whittaker stood at the head, her journal open, chanting in that same strange language. Mr. Whittaker loomed beside her, his hand heavy on my shoulder to keep me still, and the creature's moans echoed faintly through the walls. Closer, hungrier. My knees shook so violently I thought I might collapse, but I forced myself to stand, to endure, because I realized then that if I didn't find a way to survive, I would become another photograph, another offering. And in that moment, a fire sparked in me, not just fear but fury. I had spent years being invisible, dismissed, treated as nothing, but now they wanted to erase me entirely, to feed me to something that should not exist. No, I wouldn't let them. As Mrs. Whittaker raised the pendant higher, the creature's chains rattling from above, I made a silent promise to myself. If they wanted to turn me into an offering, I would turn their ritual against them, and I would make sure the hunger that haunted this house finally turned on the Whittakers themselves. As Mrs. Whittaker raised the glowing pendant high, the creature's chains rattling louder from the attic above, the chanting of the children echoing through the candlelit dining room, I felt my body seize with terror, but my mind sharpened with clarity. Because in that moment I understood the truth. I wasn't the first to stand in this spot, trembling and waiting to be devoured, and if I didn't act, I would be erased just like the others, another faceless offering in their grotesque family tradition. So instead of succumbing to fear, I remembered every hallway, every locked drawer, every frantic night I had spent in that cursed house, and I clutched the scissors hidden beneath my apron like a lifeline, waiting for the right moment. Mrs. Whittaker's voice rose in a feverish pitch, the symbols on the table glowing faintly as though alive, the air turning thick with heat, and then the attic door upstairs banged open with such force the walls trembled, and she appeared, stumbling, crawling. The creature I had seen crouching in the shadows now free, her chains dragging across the floor, her hair plastered to her face, her body contorted in ways no human body should bend, and yet her milky eyes locked directly onto me. "She's ready." Mrs. Whittaker whispered with reverence, gesturing toward me as if I were a sacrifice laid at an altar, but in that moment rage overtook fear, and I shoved the scissors deep into Mr. Whittaker's thigh, making him howl and collapse, his grip on me breaking. Chaos erupted. The children shrieked, their chanting turning to wails, the pendant in Mrs. Whittaker's hand flaring red as she screamed for control. But the creature's hunger was too great, and with a sound like bones snapping, she lunged, not at me, but at the woman who had bound her. Mrs. Whittaker's scream was unlike anything I'd ever heard, high and guttural at once, as the creature's hands closed around her throat, pulling her into the chalk-drawn circle, dragging her body across the table, knocking candles to the floor. Fire sparked, licking up the edges of the symbols, smoke filling the room, and in the chaos I saw my chance. I grabbed the fallen pendant, its silver burning cold against my skin, and shouted the only words I had read over and over in the journal. "Release the bond." For a moment the entire house shook, the walls groaning, the lights exploding one by one, and the creature froze, her head snapping toward me, her pale face twisting as though she were fighting some invisible command. Then she turned her wrath on Mr. Whittaker, who was dragging himself across the floor, blood trailing behind him. His cries for mercy were drowned by the sound of chains tightening, bones crunching, and I forced myself to look away as he was pulled into the fire. The children huddled In the corner, their wide eyes staring blankly, chanting words under their breath like broken dolls. And though my heart ached with pity, I knew there was no saving them. They had been part of this pact for too long, their innocence long since corrupted. I clutched the pendant tighter, my voice breaking as I screamed again, "Release the bond." And this time the creature shrieked, her scream rattling, the windows shaking the foundation, and then the chains shattered, clattering to the floor like dead snakes. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the crackle of fire, and then the creature straightened, her body unfolding with a terrible grace. Her eyes fixing on me, I braced myself, certain she would rip me apart, but instead she whispered one word in a voice that was not entirely human nor entirely lost: "Free." And with that she vanished, dissolving into smoke that seeped into the walls, leaving the house trembling and groaning like it might collapse around me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted through the smoke-filled halls, past the burning dining room, past the photographs that lined the study, until I burst out into the night air, coughing, choking my lungs, screaming for relief. Behind me, the Whittaker house burned, flames consuming the centuries-old wood, the screams of the family mingling with the cracking beams, until finally the roof caved in and silence fell. I stumbled into the road barefoot, my nightdress torn, the pendant still clutched in my hand, and collapsed as the glow of the fire painted the sky. When I woke in the hospital the next morning, the authorities told me the Whittaker family perished in the blaze, that I was lucky to escape alive, but I couldn't tell them the truth. Couldn't explain that the fire was mercy compared to the hunger that house had contained. Weeks passed, but I never shook the feeling that the creature wasn't gone, that by breaking her chains, I hadn't destroyed her, only set her free. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear the faint rattle of a chain outside my window, a whisper of my name drifting through the dark, and I wonder if she remembers me, if freeing her was enough, or if one day she will come to claim the offering she was promised. But if she does, I won't cower, because I've seen what fear can do. I've tasted the edge of death, and I know now that survival isn't about luck, it's about refusing to be erased. Thanks for watching and listening to my story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries.